with another episode of Trojanpear's Book Club on Halloween week. Yes, sir. I tell you, we got some special things in store for you this week. But today we're going to look at a book series that actually connects to another video. In fact, it was my first video that I did on Trojanpear's Book Club. You know, the Bunnicula series. Here's some highlights to help remind you of all the things that happened in that video. I have accumulated a lot of books over the years. It's what I like to call Trojanpear's Book Club. This month we're going to start off with a series of books that I've read since I was a kid. This has spanned over a long period of time, and there's actually 7 books in this particular series. They're known as the Bunnicula series. He lives in New York, shares his home with dog, cats, his partner, Mark. Very cool looking with the lock up your artichokes up there at the top. So, I would give the Bunnicula series an A. And so I highly recommend that you pick up all the books in this series and that you get it for yourself, for your kid, a friend, and get started reading. And until the next review that I have in Trojanpear's Book Club, this is the Trojanpear encouraging you to be a Readosaurus. You know, that still is my most viewed video of all time. It's also one of my favorite books and book series growing up as a child to this day. But I felt, as popular as it was, and as much as I enjoy the Bunnicula series in general, knowing that we have a lot of different offshoots and series, it's about time that we go ahead and start doing some more of those books. And having recently read one of the more recent offshoot series from the Bunnicula series, I decided, let's do this one. It is Tales from the House of Bunnicula series. Alright, so we are ready to get started with our first official video here for Halloween week. This is Tales from the House of Bunnicula. This was a offshoot series that came around 2003. I guess this was originally after the book Bunnicula Strikes Again, because it does not include the very last book of Bunnicula Meets Edgar Allan Poe. And I think, if I remember correctly, it fell in, there was sort of a prelude to this sort of idea coming up. But this is a short series, and what it is it is stories that are told from the perspective of Howie, the little dachshund right there, who was prominent in several of the Bunnicula books, starting with the third one. He first made his appearance or was born in the second book, Holiday Inn, and then became a character added to the series then from the third book on. In this, though, he is the author. Now, in the original Bunnicula series, the dog Harold was the author of this series, and it's kind of given way for Howie to be able to get his feet wet in the idea of writing. But Howie's not quite as proficient as Harold is as a writer, and that's because Howie doesn't want to do things in the aspect of nonfiction, because these are all fiction books, but the way that it's written like Harold wrote it, and Harold would be telling the true perspective, the true stories of what was going on. Well, Howie's making up stuff in these. So these are 6 totally made up stories by Howie, but it's the characters from the original. Howie is the prominent one who is writing these. Let's go ahead and read the back of the first one here. All 6 of these kind of have the same theme, but I'll differentiate on it a little bit. It says, "Dear possible reader of this book, I want to be a writer, just like my Uncle Harold, who wrote a bunch of books about our friend Bunnicula. So I wrote this story, and boy, did I ever get into trouble. My friend Delilah stopped speaking to me because I put her in my book. Uncle Harold stopped speaking to me because I didn't put him in my book. A writer's life isn't easy. But back to my story. It's about how a talented and lovable, not to mention smart, wire-haired dachshund puppy named Howie saves the world from a disgusting, evil menace named... Oops. That would give away the story. But trust me, this menace is disgusting and evil. All right? Your friend, Howie." And this is actually part of the deal. This is a very creative, actually, series of books, because it takes one section of it, which is broken up in different perspectives, where you see Howie writing in the journal. You don't actually see it, but I mean, you get the scribble, kind of like how this is, where it's handwritten, and then you got the type part, and the type part is where is the actual story itself, and he'll interject at certain parts to kind of note the different things that are going on as he's writing this story. And you'll see kind of in the story that one of the things that's a common theme is when it talks about how he says how a talented and lovable, not to mention smart, he likes to use adjectives to describe himself, and that's a common theme that comes up just about every book consistently. In this first book, it's Howie's first time writing, and it's the first time having a lot of the characters interact with him on his writing. Delilah, who's his friend, often gets upset at him throughout the series about not being able to write her character very well. Harold and Chester and Bunnicula, who are all prominent characters in the original series, basically have no part in the stories themselves. It's basically about Howie and Delilah for the most part, and maybe some the Monroes, the family, might make more appearances more often than even Harold or Chester do. But they are mentioned at times throughout his journal writing. They do have little moments, particularly Harold, since Harold is the author and Howie often goes to him for advice. Well, in this one, Howie, obviously, in his novice skills, creates his first story. It apparently works out because he gets it published, obviously. But everybody gets upset with him in this one. When you get into the second one, oh, by the way, this one is called It Came From Beneath the Bed, which that one's pretty good. But then you get to the second book, The Invasion of the Mind Swappers from Asteroid 6. This one, I gotta tell you, I think this one was probably one of the funniest ones that I read, because he comes up with this, if you see the bold title for it, the TM, the trademark. He actually does that, and Harold's like, "What is that?" It's like, "Oh, you got a trademark." So it's pretty funny. I don't usually laugh at a lot of books, but that was really funny. This series is quite entertaining. He tries to get Delilah to respect him as a writer a little bit more, but she always complains that he can't write female characters. Well, when you get to the third one, Howie Monroe and the Doghouse of Doom, basically this one he rips off of the Harry Potter series. So you'll see stuff like Canine Conjurers, Dog Whiz Academy. Uh, the villain is the evil force who cannot be named, whose name cannot be spoke. So yeah, there's a lot of ties to that, and so they kind of point out that there's something off about that. Then the fifth one, which is the Screaming Mummies of the Pharaoh's Tomb 2, is one where he and Delilah co-write, or try to anyway, and they have a lot of issues, and you'll see a lot of the story like get scratched out because she's scratching out different things that he was doing and whatnot, and then like she'll write a chapter, he'll write a chapter, and they'll be back and forth on that, and they keep changing the title of it. Finally, they come up with the title. It comes up with the title at the end of it, which is a sequel, which he decides to make a sequel to the comic book that he bases this idea off of. And the author absolutely of the original absolutely loved it, whatnot. But all this is motivated by the fact that he's trying to win a New Boney Award, I think is what it's called. The New Boney. Yeah, the New Boney Award. And that's why he got her to try to help him be able to do it. And, so that was quite interesting. But then, okay, you get to the fifth one here, you got Bud Barkin, Private Eye. Now this one was actually where you start to see how he really developed as an author, because he has he does this sort of noir mystery sort of setup, and it follows the same kind of pattern that a lot of those do, but he has begun to lose a lot of those weird tendencies that he had in the first few, but he's still got several of them, believe you me. But he really buys into this caricature that he gets, and this is actually probably one of the best stories, just for the enjoyment of it. But because you get to, what you also get to see, and this is what's really good about it, is because he talks about the mystery, and you gotta outline, you gotta plan and whatnot, and he kind of doesn't do that, and then he kind of gets caught, and then he starts planning at the last minute to try and tie up loose ends. It's really a good series trying to deal with somebody who wants to be a writer, or to write and to begin writing stories. It'll help you kind of see how you can grow and develop and learn as a writer. That's what I think is really great about all these. That gets me to this last one. The Amazing, or cross that, The Odorous Adventures of Stinky Dog. This one's based, again, on a comic. It was based upon his, or a comic idea, superhero thing. In fact, the illustrations in this, probably some of the most interesting illustrations are done like a comic style. The stories that go in here, about the story here is about the fact that they keep giving him baths because he keeps trying to roll in something that's stinky, and so he gets the idea to write this book. And apparently his girlfriend, quote unquote, Delilah, gets upset at him again initially, saying he can't write female characters, but then at the end it kind of turns out good. And the way this one kind of finishes, you kind of feel like, okay, this is like the culmination now. You've seen the progression from the first one all the way to this one, and now you kind of feel like, some of the tie-ins of some of the characters and whatnot, you think, okay, this would actually be, you don't have to end it here, but it does kind of feel like this is where it wraps up to a degree. That some of the stuff that happened, that's been kind of popped up throughout the series, is kind of wrapped up now for the most part. You could always bring it back, of course, but it does feel like it just kind of wraps up, that this is the end of the series. And of course, this was the last book I don't know of any others that are out there other than these 6, so I would imagine that that was the last one in this short series. So, this series, all in all, is very good. I gotta say, the cover art is nice. It's fairly decent here. I like that. The squirrel, the Doghouse of Doom is not too much there, and that one's not a whole lot to it. The Bud Bark, and I don't know, the Stinky Dog. I like the Stinky Dog one. That's kind of neat. Some of the illustrations, I don't know. I'm not too keen on a lot of the illustrations in here. They're just too much of a sketchy sort of nature to it. Doesn't seem to always have a lot of. It just seems so dark a lot of times because it's so sketch-like, and it's kind of hard to really tell any kind of details or whatnot to it. So I'm not too crazy about the illustrations in it. Of course, it kind of feels like the first Bunnicula book, which was that way a lot. But I mean, it's nitpicky on that. But getting to the actual value of the stories, probably where I rank them, I don't know. I really liked Bud Barkin. That might have been my favorite one. The Mind Swappers was pretty funny. Stinky Dog, Doghouse of Doom. I don't know. Maybe, and this is just kind of random, I'm not really too sure. The first one I was not too crazy about. It was very novice-like, obviously. To me, this one was more all over the place than the other ones were. It didn't have a whole lot to it. As you kind of got going, it got better. This one was actually pretty clever, actually. So I might actually have this one higher. But the Screaming Mummies, I didn't like the story as much, though, for it. But the interaction there where they were fighting about who was doing what and all that, that was pretty interesting, though, in it. Stinky Dog, the last one, I didn't think that one was quite as interesting as far as what was going on in it. So maybe I might rank this one a little bit higher, possibly. I don't know. But Doghouse of Doom, the Harry Potter, I think that was a pretty neat one, even though there wasn't much going on outside of that one either. But I thought this one was really funny, the Mind Swappers. Although, I will say, I think it was this one. I think it was this last one was pretty funny, too. Stinky Dog. I think that was also pretty funny. I can't remember about that, but Bud Barkin, probably my favorite one. It was the most well-written story, probably, that he did out of all of them. And I liked the whole mystery thing. You got the part there where he does the outline where he's trying to come up with all his loose ends and tie them all together. I thought that was really neat too. This one probably more. The reason I probably like this one the best too is you really get the sense that as you're going through these, because I think this was the 5th one, that this is a progression of writing style, and I think that's what's really clever and what's really useful. For kids who are reading this, that they can kind of see how the writing process works and be able to learn and develop their own potential writing skills in this. So that's what I really like about them. That I really enjoy is the whole idea of it kind of shows you how you can go from being a novice to being better. It takes work and revision and outlining and different things. So this one I think really starts to show how he starts to develop a little bit of those skills, even though he still is a little lazy, but he definitely improves upon his writing style in this one to the point where you really see it a lot more. So that's why I like that one the best. I think, though, All these are about on even keel. And I think this is a very good offshoot series for the Bunnicula series. And I give this series B plus overall. Not as good as the Bunnicula series, but definitely B plus, A minus, somewhere around that range. Definitely. So next time we're going to have a special episode that we're going to be having. But until then, I wish everybody blessings, and I encourage you to keep on reading. Read the sources. Bye-bye.